Okay, my friends, here comes the serious part of the show after the jokes. We have a very knowledgeable man, Walid Shoebat, on the Savage Nation. Without further introduction, Walid, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, Walid, you know more about the area than I do. ISIS, who are they really?
ISIS came as a result of the conflict in Syria, in which the U.S. began to aid the Free Syrian Army. Of course, you had the Nusra began to fight with Free Syrian Army. And as a result, later on came the ISIS, which came from out of Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, a terrorist, Jordanian terrorist.
Wait, slow down, Walid. Are you saying that by the United States supporting the rebels, so-called, in Syria, they grew out of that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So these are the Frankenstein. This is a Frankenstein creation of John McCain and Barack Obama, in other words.
Absolutely. In fact, right now, if you look at the situation in Iraq, all the soldiers that were trained, all the operatives that were trained by the United States, who were anti-ISIS in all the areas where ISIS took over, are now enlisting by the droves with the ISIS.
Oh, my God.
So it is much worse than we think. So this is why we've always been against the removal of Saddam Hussein. This is why, on record, I've always been against this kind of war in Iraq, that we create vacuums, and those vacuums are always filled in with a much worser picture.
Correct. I said the same thing, that Bush 1 had it right, which was to weaken Saddam Hussein but not kill him. Bush 2 was advised by the neocons like Wolfowitz and others. They said wipe them all out. We killed Saddam. All we did was make the world safer for Iran and Iran's expansionist tendencies. Do you agree with that assessment?
I agree fully. Look at the situation in Iraq. Banks are closed. Police dismantled. Judicial courts are replaced. All government employees must attend ISIS centers, declare their allegiance to the ISIS. They must get a repentance document. They must get a document that they are innocent. If not, and they are Shia or Christians, they're beheaded, or from the front of the neck, the back of the neck, or even shot. We showed videos galore on this issue. All Christians now are prohibited from working in the government or buying and selling unless they give allegiance to the caliphate. All doors are knocked on to report how many unmarried girls exist in order to marry them to the ISIS soldiers. In Mosul, they have issued what they term the city covenant, in which all tombs, like the biblical tomb of Jonah, is to be destroyed, and it was destroyed, and no one did anything.
So this plague upon the world, is it a new plague, or is it a resurgent virus that has mutated into this more virulent form?
It's not new at all. I mean, if you go to Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was the commander general of the Prophet of Islam himself, and he went to Iran, Persia, and he killed the Christians. He vowed to make a ravine of blood, drink the blood from the skulls of the enemies, and in which they had to even open water to wash the coagulated blood. I could show you photos of reminiscent from history of towers of skulls that the Islamists have done. How do you think the Islamists or the Muslims occupied, the Middle East, from Syria to Lebanon to Turkey to Byzantium, everything? This is basically a recreation.
Right. In other words, the Muslims did not conquer these nations through love and through the golden teachings of their book. They did it through the most vicious, Hitler-like tactics the world had ever seen.
Absolutely. I mean, if you ask an ISIS, what do you want? Here's what he will tell you. He will tell you, I want the dismantlement of Sykes-Picot. He tell you that I want to recreate the Islamic Caliphate, which was bruised in Turkey in the Ottomans. He will tell you that every single tribal system must submit to the order of the one rule of one nation called the Nation of Islam. He will tell you that all Christians must either submit, die, or pay the jizya taxation. It's exactly what happened in history. It's exactly what's happening now. Homes are marked with the letter Nun, N, which means Nusrani, Nazarene, the follower of the Nazarene, that's Christian. And if they don't pay the jizya, they are killed, beheaded. They're uprooted. That's why they all decided to leave. In fact, you look at the situation now. This is the second wave that we witness now. The second wave of persecution in Iraq against Christians, and nothing's happening. After Mosul fell, now we have Qaraqosh, in which all the people who fled to Qaraqosh and to the Kurdish areas. Qaraqosh held the biggest village of Christians. Nearly 100,000 were exiled. They had no place else to go but to escape. And Qaraqosh had to face the same fate, either accept Islam, pay the jizya, or get beheaded. This is all in writing. These are edicts comes out of the ISIS.
Does our government know this? Does Obama know this?
Of course he does. We know who Obama is. We know what Obama's family is about. Obama is talking about the Yazidis, but who's talking about the Christians? I mean, I feel bad for the Yazidis. They're being stuck in a mountain hill and all of this, but they're taking the Yazidi situation. But the Christian situation is basically ignored. Only France is basically doing something.
Well, you know, the prognosis is quite poor given the weakness of the West. What do you suggest needs to be done other than total annihilation?
What needs to be done is to what happened to some minority Christians in Syria. The Lions of the Cherubim, look it up. We wrote the stories about it. We videotaped them. We showed how they held a fortress in their area, and in which the Muslim terrorists came to take over the church. Hundreds of terrorists were killed. These are victories. What American people love is victory, like Patton says, you know. It is not the idea of us dying for our country. It's making the enemy die for their cause. And this is what they have done in Syria. So the same thing needs to be done in the Christians in Iraq. We need to arm the Christians in Iraq. But many evangelicals in America will disagree because you're supposed to turn the other cheek. Why is America not allowed to shouldn't turn the other cheek? And why Israel doesn't turn the other cheek? I'm for Israel. Israel doesn't turn the other cheek in Gaza. Why only the Assyrian Christians are demanded to turn the other cheek? So we should arm the people. We should give them the ability to fight back as they did in Syria and have them conquer the Islamists once and for all.
But isn't Assad, as horrendous as he was, the last great hope to annihilate them, first in Syria and then in northern Iraq? Wouldn't the Syrian army itself be the best equipped and the best able to destroy them?
These people who hate Assad should go ask the Christians in Syria what they think of Bashar al-Assad. They voted for him. Under Bashar al-Assad, Jewish minorities and Christian minorities were absolutely protected. There was no harm done to them. So, yes, as much as they think he's a dictator, yes, he is anti-Israel. Of course, Israel can tame Bashar al-Assad as Reagan tamed Muammar al-Qaddafi in the past. He is something that can be maintained. But taking Bashar al-Assad out, we see what happened to the Christians in Syria. We've seen what happened to Qasab. We've seen the Turkish attempt to invade even in Syria using the ISIS. The Turkish government cooperates with the ISIS. ISIS takes the oil from Syria, sells it, and the Turkish deal with these things and make money out of the whole ordeal. The Turks, with the full birds, were caught on recording, talking about how they're going to enter Syria and destroy the tomb of Sulaiman Shah, and to use the ISIS and the Islamist terrorists and the caliphate. They park right there in the borders of Syria and Turkey. No harm done by Turkey to the terrorists. So we can see a khilafah being created in the Iraqi or the Levant area. What's going to happen in the future is that the Turks will basically use this caliphate to revive the Ottoman Caliphate. That's what everybody's talking about. The Ottoman Caliphate that was bruised by the West, by Christendom. They want to revive it to destroy.
No, I needn't remind the world of the Armenian massacre. Maybe they ought to look it up. The Armenian Holocaust, where, several million Armenians were slaughtered in the streets, in their houses, everywhere along the watchtower by the Muslim Ottomans, the Ottoman Muslims. The slaughter of the the slaughter of the Armenians. People don't realize that there was a Holocaust against Christians in the form of the Armenian Holocaust. Would you tell the world on the Savage Nation just briefly what the slaughter of the Armenians was about, please, Walid?
Well, when the Turks decided to cleanse all the Armenians, there was a letter issued by the government which says, don't feel sorry for this bad situation. They took them to no man's land, and they starved them to death, million. Let's talk about the massacre of Smyrna. This is to every Christian who listens on your show, who reads their Bible, in which they look at the 7 lampstands and the 7 churches in the New Testament. One of them is a church of Smyrna. How did it end? in which the Smyrnan Christians were beheaded, decapitated. I could show you photos, black and white, of Armenian heads piled so high, in which the women finally ended up going to the loading dock, having no one to help. There was even Western ships, military ships, docked in Smyrna. The ships were told not to intervene because they had supposedly the want to influence or affect the delicate peace process with the Ottoman Turkish government, in which those women were taken to Hagia Sophia, and the beautiful women were being, taken to this Janissarian and that Janissarian, and they were fighting each other over the pretty girls, in which in Hagia Sophia was turned into a mosque. The shame of Christendom is upon us today. And you get me going on this because I see it happening to the Assyrian brothers and sisters over there. With the silence of Christians in America, it is absolutely deafening. Where are the pastors on the White House lawn crying for the Christians?
I don't know. They're useless. They're useless teaching the same old rubbish about pacifism, which is not even Christian. This whole concept of turn the other cheek is not even the fundamentals of Christianity, so far as I understand it. And I have spoken to theologians who agree with me. If Christianity had only been about turning the other cheek, there wouldn't be a Christian left on the planet.
That is absolutely correct. Christianity had fought Islam. Let's talk about the Battle of Lepanto, in which the Catholic Alliance fought. And you had some of these wimpy Christians who fought with the Muslims, who said, turn the other cheek, oh yeah. And they stood with the Muslims fighting against the Catholic Alliance. It was the largest naval armada in Christian history, in which they finally formed a cross out of the ships and ate the crescent of Islam. And they destroyed the Islamic conquest in Europe. It was the American Christians don't understand that.
No, they don't. They're sheeple. They go to these churches, and all they get is the mumbo jumbo about being nice to the Guatemalans and El Salvadorans. Now, let me ask you something, Walid. Here's the real question today, because I know the answer, but I want you, the expert, to tell the listeners of this show the danger they're in. With the millions of Muslims in this country, how many of these Muslims in America are potentially jihadists?
Well, you have two sides of Muslims. You have Muslims who are openly jihadists in America. In every single Muslim organization, there are major organizations, whether from the Muslim Islamic Society, ISNA, the CARE Group, all of these people, you will find leaders who were caught and imprisoned for financial terrorism. Every single one of them. You have Muslim minority affairs programs. You have Hillary Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin, who her father wrote the manifesto for the Saudi government on how to use the Muslim minorities in America. But first they have to destroy the Jews of America. This is actually in the manifesto. I was the first in the country to translate. He was one of the 20 scholars who worked on this manifesto. This is Huma Abedin.
Is that why she married Anthony Weiner of Jewish descent?
The reason she can marry Anthony Weiner is because her mother, we got her membership in the Muslim Brotherhood. She wasn't just a member, she was a leader in the Muslim Sisterhood organization, in which Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi issued an edict called Muruna. Every American should read it. I was the first to discover all these things. M-U-R-U-N-A, Muruna, in which Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi legitimized that Muslim women can marry non-Muslims, and Muslims can work in banks, even though banks practice what they call riba or usury. They're allowed to work in banks. Even Muslims are allowed to kill other Muslims if the killing will kill the enemy. So this is part of the Muslim Brotherhood agenda in which the Egyptian government...
you mentioned, I jokingly said that America, the White House is run by the Muslim Sisterhood. I didn't even know such a sisterhood existed. Walid, before we take a quick break, is there really a Muslim Sisterhood? And is it possible some of them are advising the president? Listen, I'll be right back on the Savage Nation with Walid Shoebat, right here on the Savage Nation. Lechem salam to my guest, Walid Shoebat, who knows more about this than anyone I've ever met. Walid, welcome back to the Savage Nation. His website is shoebat.com, shoebat.com. If you want to see pictures of what your Muslim friends have done through history, instead of reading the fantasies that you're being taught by your government, go to shoebat.com. He's a man who knows what he's talking about, former member of the PLO, former terrorist. He knows what he's talking about. Walid, is there a Muslim Sisterhood?
In fact, the Muslim Sisterhood was established in Egypt in 1933
Good God.
by Ahmed. Labiba Ahmed started then. And in fact, the United States is not immune of sisterhood influence. The group's male supervisor is Abdullah Nuhshan. He was the director of the Virginia office of the Muslim World League. And let's talk about the Muslim World League. The financial arm is a defunct Rabita Trust.
Walid, listen, before we're almost out, we have a minute left. I could talk with you for 3 more hours. Walid, how worried should we be in America about this ISIS group having penetrated through front groups, not only the government, but our intelligence agencies and the FBI? Is there any worry on that regard?
Absolutely. This is in every aspect of our government. In the military, you have Taha Jabr al-Alawani, who recruits the clergy. What you have, the Fort Hood massacre, all that is a result of this kind of thing. You have Abdullah Omar Nassif, who was the boss of the Abedins, who was the boss of Abedin, Anthony Weiner's wife. You know, Salih Abedin is the mother. And she...
Good God. So, Walid, you mean I can wake up one day and find out that the country is run by a radical Muslim? Or have I already awakened to that?
You will wake up to ISIS coming into this country and blowing up major infrastructure.